Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Hoffman Reproductions. Good to be with everybody once again today. And on this episode, we are going to cover the basics of building a classic Scottish dirk. As far as a little bit of dirk history goes, the Scottish dirk is an evolution of a style of knife called a ballock dagger from medieval time periods. Primarily a thrusting weapon. As you can see here on the example I have, it has a very acute tip on it. They also featured a cutting edge, of course, but primarily a thrusting weapon. It was used in conjunction with a Scottish shield called a targe. In your main hand, if you were right-handed, you would typically carry a broadsword, and if you were right-handed, then in the left hand you would carry a small shield called a targe, and you would hold the dirk like so, with the blade extending this way. About half of it would stick out at the base of the shield in the left hand, and you could come down on an enemy with it. You could of course use it like a knife, any way that you typically would use a knife, but that was the way it was traditionally designed, to be a thrusting weapon. As I said, they were an evolution of a ballock dagger, and as time went on, starting about 1690 is when the first true Scottish dirk developed. They would have a wooden handle, sometimes a bone or a brass handle though, typically carved a certain way, and then it would have a tapering, some refer to it as a wedge or a leafed shape blade. And then the true form of the Scottish dirk, which many people consider the purest form, is from that early time period of about 1700 to 1740. After the Battle of Culloden in 1746, Scottish dirks were actually outlawed by the British government. Highlanders were no longer allowed to carry them unless they were in the British military. So they started to change after that point. But the true form of it, what many refer to it as the purest form, was that time period 1700 to 1740s. The example that I'm going to show here today, as you can see I've already forged the blade out, is going to be a reproduction of an early dirk from the 1690s, one of the earliest on record and that still exists. And this is a pretty meaty sized dirk. You probably can't tell from the video footage, but it's about 1/4 of an inch thick on the back. Has this false edge which runs about halfway, and is about 12.5 inches in overall length. This one has been hand forged and shaped out of a vintage leaf spring that I got out of an old barn, probably akin to what would be 1070 tool steel. And I'm not going to cover how I forged and shaped the blade. We've done that already on a previous video. If you want to see my process for that, just go back to Forging a Patch Knife series of videos that we did there, and that'll show you the basic way that I forge and shape blades. This was done in the same fashion, just on a larger scale. But as I said, we're going to be making an earlier style dirk. I'm not going to attempt to cover every little minute detail as far as dirk construction, because it's the same as a lot of knife making. Again, you can go back and look at our other videos, but the things that you only do for a Scottish dirk, I'm planning to show on this video here. First thing you need to do if you're going to build one is you want to build one that is historically correct, and you have to pick a time period that you're fascinated with. Now when you say Scottish dirk, most people picture something that looks like that. Very gaudy, the dark wood handle, you know, very, very fancy mounts. And these are indeed Scottish dirks, but they're not from that time period I talked about. These are Scottish dirks that, this was the form and shape, jewel encrusted, you know, everything, from around the 1800s on up into the 1900s. So that's not what we want. We're going with a much earlier version of the Scottish dirk, and this is a book I would recommend. As you can see there, the author and the name of the book. A lot of good examples of early ones in there. And just like anything else that I make, I try and little camera jolt there. have a strong historical example to work off of. I don't like to put too much of my own design in Scottish Dirks and stick with the original as close to possible. Another one there, very helpful. A lot of originals in there with measurements that you can get. And lastly, this book here, George C. Newman's Swords, Blades, and Blades of the American Revolution. Some good examples in there to get your designs from. As I said, we're going to this one is going to be pretty closely based on an original from the 1690s. Going to have the carved wooden handle that I'll go into detail on. But again, the forging and shaping, I haven't heat treated it yet, but I am set up to thread the tang. Most Scottish Dirks have a threaded tang, which has a decorative nut or capstan as it's called on swords, and you have to set up the end of your tang round and then thread it with a, here we go, a die in order to accept the threads. If you've not done that before, and this would be the first step on something that's purely a Scottish Dirk, it is used on other knives but not generally. If you're forging and shaping your end, of course you're going to be doing this by hand, so you have to be very careful not to make it too big around or too small. A little bit too thick is fine, but a good way that I've found to avoid doing that, and this particular tap that I'm going to use is 8 by 32, the size. You want to work this down till the end fits in there just about maybe just slightly less than a third of the way before it hits something, and then make your base gently tapering so that when you're cutting you're getting into good meat, and usually about a ½ inch. You want to lay out your handle accordingly. Most Scottish Dirk handles, and I'll go into more detail about this later, were relatively short. They were 4 to 4½ inches, so whatever you need to do on your end here, it's a standard tang forged out, but the end is worked down round in order to accept the die and the threading process, which I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that here first as we go through this process. Alright, so we're set up here to begin threading the end of the tang for a corresponding nut. Just a couple of things you'll need, of course, is a vise to chuck it securely in. All taps, unless you buy them, are right-handed thread, so clockwise as you're turning, unless for some reason you buy a left-handed thread, but clockwise. Wooden pads to protect, of course, the Dirk blade in the jaws of the vise. I have it just setting on there right now. I've given it about a quarter turn. You also want to make sure that you use some cutting oil or just motor oil, a few drops every now and then. That'll help keep those cutting smoothly. And if you've never done this before, you take it slow. I'll demonstrate here. And you push downward and try and keep it level, and go in about quarter turn increments. This one's actually cutting pretty good. Go back and forth occasionally to clean out the threads. So again, a little downward pressure, keep it level, quarter turns, go back and forth every now and then, and a little shot of oil. So just continue to do that till you get the proper depth that you're looking for. Alright, so we've got our threads all tapped there, or excuse me, cut the die on the end. Hopefully it went smooth for you. I had to stop and adjust it just a little bit. My base here was just a little thick, and as a result the tap was not wanting to go full depth that I needed to, so I had to stop and use a needle file and carefully go around it and relieve it a little bit. If you just keep turning it and the die can't continue to go down as it cuts, it'll strip out your threads up here. So you need to be real careful. If it's binding and not wanting to go down, stop and relieve a little bit of the metal. But I've got it, the threads cut to the depth that I need. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and make an iron nut. This will be, you know, all fancy and filed out when we're done here. I just need something to hold it as the work continues. So I've got a piece of iron in the vise here that I'm going to cut a little square nut out of. You can also just use a hardware store nut for this if you want to. I don't have one for that size, so I'm just making one. And same thing with the die. You want to use a tap wrench, the appropriate size tap to cut the hole, and you cut it in the same fashion. Make sure you have the right handles. You don't try and do this with a pair of pliers or vice grip, because generally that ends badly. So you cut it in the same fashion that you did the die. Just a little bit of oil, half turn at a time, cleaning it out till you get the full depth. Okay, so we have finished making our nut and getting it threaded on there. It fits good. Hopefully yours does too. And I may end up keeping this one. As I said, generally they're decoratively filed and shaped, so we'll see. If I decide what I want to make for this one, this will work, we'll keep it. If not, we'll make another one. But that's going to be it on this video. I'm going to try and keep these relatively short so as to not overwhelm people with too much information and make more videos as opposed to longer ones. But again, we're going to cover all of the basics of Scottish dirk making in that traditional time period, 1690, 1740. And yes, we will be going into detail about how to carve the intimidating Scottish dirk handle, doing the intricate Celtic knot work, or interlace as it's called. There is a method to that, which I'm going to attempt to show on camera. Hopefully it'll answer a lot of questions. Scottish dirks can be very intimidating to make if you've never made one before. A lot going on with them, especially with the handle, but hopefully this will help you through that process by not just giving you something to read like in a book format, but actually showing you how it's done. But with a little persistence and practice, you can knock one of these out, and the end product is well worth the time invested. So that's going to do for now. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning into our channel. I'd like to invite you to subscribe if you haven't. That way you'll get notifications when new videos come out. And please feel free to check out our homepage. It has our website link where you can see a lot of the items that we have on here for sale, including this Scottish dirk. When it's finished, will be going up for sale on there. So thanks so much again, and everybody, take care until next time.